In The Lord of the Rings, a question that often comes up is, why didn't Gandalf use his powers more, and why wasn't he stronger, considering he was the same type of creature as Sauron? That question, while perhaps simple on the surface, delves deep into the philosophy of The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien himself, and it is one of the many examples of the book's very religious themes. Before we can get into that, however, let us first get on the same page regarding what Gandalf is, as well as his powers and capabilities. Gandalf's real name is Olorin, and he was a member of the Ainur, the Holy Ones, and more specifically a Maya, essentially meaning a lesser Ainu, that usually served one of the Valar, the greater Ainur. The Valar that he was most commonly associated with was Niena, the Lady of Grief and Compassion, from whom Olorin learned true and genuine patience and compassion. As a Maya, he was of considerably lesser might than the Valar, but he was similarly created before the birth of the world, and likewise participated in the music of the Ainur, which oversaw what eventually became Middle-earth. While the Valar have unparalleled power and were known for moving mountains, raising seas, and shifting continents, the Maya were also very powerful, with other notable examples being Sauron, Saruman, and the Balrogs. Now, the full extent of their powers is not known to us, as Tolkien was deliberately vague in order to emphasize the mystery of his world. Nonetheless, what we do see repeatedly throughout The Lord of the Rings is that the powers of evil have, again and again, used their powers considerably more than those of good. Although Gandalf is on a relatively similar ground to his peers, he does not utilize his divine powers to the full extent that we know he is capable of once we observe the side of evil. This state of events is almost without exception in the history of Middle-earth, unless the very fabric of the world is at stake, and the most important part of the equation, the children, is absent. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, as has been recognized in Tolkien's replies to letters by even atheist or agnostic fans, the constant presence of the divine can be felt despite its apparent absence. You can feel it through Tolkien's descriptions of nature, of ages past, through the elves, and through the constant struggle of good against evil. You can also see it, as opposed to just feel it, through Gandalf himself, who is a literal angel sent by God to assist the free peoples in their plight. This act alone must imply that Eru Iluvatar, or God, who is the definition of good, wants evil to be defeated, and that is why he helps. If that is the case though, why doesn't he smite Morgoth and Sauron outright? Why doesn't he wipe them off the map? Or better yet, ensure they never turn to evil? Well, for the same reason why he doesn't empower the side of good to the point of having the same effect as him doing it himself directly. Evil within The Lord of the Rings exists because, similarly to Catholic theology from which Tolkien was inspired, free will exists. Through free will, Melkor fell and became Morgoth, and through his darkness, the rest of the world gained the capacity to fall too. Perhaps they would have fallen regardless, but in the end, this is what happened in our story. It is through an individual's spiritual strength and understanding that he has the capacity to resist sin as much as possible and to rise above it. Smiting Sauron and Morgoth out of existence would not only take away Sauron and Morgoth's free will, to which they are entitled, but it would also take away the growth, strength, and understanding gained by their adversaries, who used their own free will to fight for what was right. If you take away Sauron and Morgoth, you take away Frodo and Sam's capacity to choose, through their flame imperishable, to fight against the darkness. Gandalf, as an agent of Eru Iluvatar, or God, functions in the same exact way. If he were to unleash all of his might and throw away the body of the old man, what would have become of the ignorant and weak hobbits, or to the man that would have earned his right to be king? This philosophical understanding of the world, as you can see, simultaneously functions as a literary device, as having literal God on your side must certainly make things easier, and yet, within The Lord of the Rings, danger looms at every corner, and darkness is nearly all-consuming. Now, you might say that, to the extent of respecting the Dark Lord's free will, you understand. But why must people die randomly? Why must disease, famine, and evil just exist? Why should a brick accidentally fall on a mason's head, kill him, and destroy his family? These questions obviously extend outside of The Lord of the Rings, yet why Eru Iluvatar allows evil and why he doesn't smite it away is directly connected to these real-world questions. Obviously, if I had an objective answer to all of this, I wouldn't be making YouTube videos, as people have been debating these things since forever. In terms of the original premise of the video, however, the only person whose opinion does ultimately matter is Tolkien himself. For Tolkien, all of these things were firstly meant to guide humanity to spiritual betterment, and secondly, and perhaps most importantly, are a direct result of humanity's fall and sin, which through its hubris turned perfection into darkness. Again and again throughout his letters, as well as unpublished drafts of the Silmarillion, or through stories such as the destruction of Numenor, Tolkien is deeply concerned about the fall of man, whose direct result is death. The babies in Numenor had nothing to do with the sins of their fathers, and yet they too drowned, and this is why. Opinions, like I said, vary, and for some Eru could be a cruel god, while for others a just one. For Tolkien, who has outright said that Eru is the Christian god, the answer is obviously just. And, having said all of this, if Eru Iluvatar doesn't intervene strongly throughout the events of our stories so as not to infringe upon the free will of his children, why does he do so at other times? In the First War of Arda, in which the Valar fought against Melkor, the forces of good were obviously permitted by Eru to use the full extent of their powers. The same applies when it came to the protection of the elves, again by the Valar. In these examples, Eru did not hinder the powers of his holy ones like he did with Gandalf. What was different? Well, when it came to the First War, what was at stake was creation itself, and not only that, but Eru simply allowed the good Valar to exercise their free will and defend the newly created world, just as he allowed Melkor to rebel, and a similar situation arose when it came to the first chaining of Melkor. After all, fighting against Melkor does not hinder Melkor's free will, and the same applies to Sauron and Gandalf. Gandalf did fight against the forces of darkness, and he was even brought back stronger when he perished following the battle with the Balrog, which may hint that he had passed his own test in the eyes of Eru, and had earned the right to be divinely empowered, though still not to the point of ending Sauron and his armies in an instant. God is undeniably on the side of good, however, and always wants to help, and as such, he assists his angel to the point of guiding the children of Iluvatar, but not taking lead and dominating them as if they were his subjects, like Saruman or Sauron did. A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.